I'm Beth Barista, and you're watching PHTV4. We are at Wild Birds Unlimited today with Mel Tracy, who owns Wild Birds, along with his wife, Laura. Thanks for having us today, Mel.
Oh, thanks for coming out.
Okay. We want to start talking about the past year and what happened with the birds, starting with the spring. So we had the cicadas, big cicada population. So can you take us through what happened with that?
For sure, and the cicadas are kind of the gift that just keeps on giving, you know, like, I don't remember the whole oak mite thing happening, but quite a few people had the oak mites happening, but as far as the birds were concerned, they did super well, had tons of babies because there was just so much extra, you know, food around with these cicadas. Everybody was eating the cicadas, and so that was a really great thing. One thing we noticed, some customers were making comments about there's not any acorns around. And I've had other customers saying like, oh, you know what? Our squirrels are going crazy. They're trying foods they've never tried. They're jumping all over the place. The squirrels are going nuts. And so I actually was talking to Laura about this just the other day, and she said, well, why is it? And I'm like, let's Google if the cicadas had anything to do with this. And it turns out that the cicadas, when they eat those ends of the branches, they really knock back all those acorns. So there's not a lot of food around right now. So it's been kind of an interesting thing,
Yeah, usually we see tons of acorns all over the place, and we're not seeing it. So it did have an effect.
It had a real big effect, yeah.
Okay, and then now take us into the summer. The summer was hot and dry. Did that have an effect on the birds?
Right, and I mean, that was like kind of the continuation of this whole cicada thing, right? So the trees like lost a lot of their production because of the cicadas. Now come dry weather, and now they can't really produce the fruits and nuts and seeds as much as they normally would. So we're kind of seeing like across the board, you know, like people are coming in a little bit more often to the store than they normally would, and it's just kind of really picking up after a spring where there wasn't much bird feeding going on because there were so many cicadas. So it's really been an evolving situation. Yeah.
Okay, and now we're in the fall, into the fall. Now the migration has pretty much happened already, but is there anything that any birds that we can still see right now that might be migrating?
Yeah, I'm not sure when this is going on, but there's a sage thrush, which is like where the sage grows all the way out west. There's one of those guys hanging out in the Hidden Lake Forest Preserves, you know, where every fall we get some of these real kind of rare birds, and it's kind of interesting. Birds kind of like migrate, and they're supposed to go, you know, north and south, or whatever, and sometimes birds just go the wrong direction, you know. And this guy, the sage thrush, which should be out in like Montana or New Mexico now, just all of a sudden showed up here.
Yes. So. Well, you know, that brings up, I just thought about this. We used to see a lot of monarchs in our backyard. In fact, we raised them and let them go. We saw very few this year.
Yeah.
And do you think the weather has affected them, or what is it?
Yeah, it's the weather that's probably affected them. That's the kind of narrow thing. I mean, overall, they're having a bad time of it because where they overwinter in Mexico doesn't get cold enough. They're up in the mountains, doesn't get cold enough. And so that really affects the way they can hibernate, and obviously habitat loss. And, you know, so many people here, customers and just people locally, really care and have been doing a great job of planting plants for them. But it's a long way from Mexico to here, you know. So they've got good places to you know, breed here, but not so much down there.
So the more milkweed we can plant and native plants, the better for them.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, they're not putting out nectar when it's hot and dry. These plants can't put out nectar and can't feed the adults, you know. So
Okay. One thing we talked about a little bit earlier, just you and I, about the hummingbirds. And so my husband and I were having a discussion. He took the feeder down. I'm like, maybe not yet. But he's like, well, we haven't seen a hummingbird in several days. So what do we do about the hummingbirds?
Okay, so for sure, our hummingbirds, the ones that are in our yard, are long gone. You know, they have headed to Mexico, and hopefully no hurricanes have messed them up, and they're going to make it down to South America. So our guys are gone. That's pretty much a given. There are still occasional. I had one on a couple of days ago, you know, and he's probably a stray from somewhere up in Canada or something like that. But one interesting thing, and it happens every year, we'll have 2 or 3 customers that'll have a hummingbird in, and like say after Halloween, between Halloween and maybe the 15th of November. And what happens is birds, we always imagine going straight north and south. It turns out that the hummingbirds that are out in the Rockies, they don't do that. They like to come straight east, they hit the Great Lakes, and then they go south. Oh. And many of those guys overwinter in Florida and bottom part of Mississippi and Georgia and that. So one really interesting thing is if you're ever going to see a different species than a regular one, which is the ruby throat, a rufous or something, black-chinned or something, it's going to happen in that 2-week window. Oh. Now, last year, one woman had a rufous that, she kept calling us every day, it's still here, it's still here, super excited. And people, actually, she put it up on a kind of a bird sharing thing on Facebook, and people were coming to her yard and everything to see this rufous hummingbird. So there's other types of birds you could actually get, which is pretty exciting for us. And it doesn't, that nectar, it's kind of cool outside, so it doesn't go bad real quickly. So you can just kind of leave it up there for a little bit.
Leave it out for a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
Great.
Before you clean it up.
Okay.
Put it away.
Talk about cleaning up.
Yeah.
So the other question we had was the bird feeders themselves.
Okay.
Should they be cleaned on a regular basis? Now we're getting into the winter.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But what should we be doing with the feeders?
So great thing to do is to wash them out with a 1 part bleach, 10 parts water solution, and that kills all of the germs that are going to affect the birds. And not seasonally, it's a great job. A great time to do it. Get into winter, have a clean feeder, because you don't want to be bringing these things in the middle of winter to clean them out. So now it's a great time. We got a couple of nice days, or you have a little Indian summer, something happen. Bring in the feeders. I usually just do it in a Home Depot bucket. Get an old shirt on, put in a little bleach, put in the water, brush them out, and then have them dry out, and you're good to go.
Okay.
And I'd like to do that in the spring, and then again in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a job I think I'll give my husband.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so now we're then talking about going forward into the winter.
Yeah.
What types of things would the backyard birder use to attract the birds to their house?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to have an issue with is the squirrels. The squirrels will be eating things because there's no other food out there. For those of you who are squirrel lovers, you can throw a little corn or something out there for those guys. But for the rest of us, something with hot pepper is probably going to be a good way to go, because that will keep the squirrels kind of off the bird food. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else like water? Do we provide water for? That's always a question.
Yeah, right. And water's super important in the winter, because the birds really, people always think, oh, there's snow around, but they really can't. It takes so much energy to take that ice cube or that piece of ice and turn it into water. And so they really can't do that. So they have to go and find a stream or somewhere, some open water somewhere. Yeah. And the last couple years, it hasn't been so bad for them because it's been relatively mild winters. Right. But there's supposedly a La Nina pattern developing that could make it much colder, could make it more snowy.
So put some water out there.
Absolutely, with a heater, I should say.
With the heater.
Yes, put a heater in your bird bath. That's really going to help the birds.
Okay, great. One last question for you. Do you have a bucket list bird that you would like to see, or maybe one that you saw already that you want to see again?
That's a great question. Actually, there's two. The one I would say right now, there's a place way up in Minnesota, at the top of Minnesota, called Saxon Bog. And there they have these really impressive winter birds, but they have the great gray owl. And so a couple of us from the store have been talking about maybe making the long trek all the way past Duluth or whatever to go and try and see one of these great grays, which are, they're the largest, but they're not the heaviest. Believe it or not, our great horned owls weigh more than these guys, but these guys are just little puffballs, not little, but they're huge.
Big,
but they're covered in feathers, but they're relatively light, But so the great gray is one I would really love to see.
Is there a time of year that is best to see it? Or?
Well, it's winter.
Winter.
And I mean, winter in northern Minnesota is just beautiful,
not,
right? If you're into like minus 25, that's the place for you.
Great.
So really looking forward to maybe getting a chance to see one of those guys.
Great. Well, Mel, thank you for having us today. Really enjoyed it. And I'm Beth Barista. This is PHTV4. Have a great fall and happy birding.